Well, good morning, everybody. It's mid-October, and it's that time of year when many people start to think about feeding the wild birds again. So I thought I'd do another bird feeder episode. In this episode, I'm going to talk about this feeder style, which is known as the hopper style. Hopper style bird feeder basically is a boxy shaped bird feeder. Usually has two sides that allow the seeds to be held inside and then fall down out the bottom through a small crack. Many of these feeders have plastic clear sides. This one actually has glass. I built this one probably 15 or so years ago now, and I'm just going to rebuild a new one using the same design and shape and dimensions. Now you may be able to see that I actually use 3 boards on the bottom here because this is quite a wide distance to cover with one board. So I just strapped 3 boards together. I got straps under here. And then these other little boards are just edges to keep the seeds in. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is cut the side pieces that hold the glass in. These are the diamond shaped pieces on the ends. Okay, I've got this nice hunk of rough cut white pine. It's actually 11.5 inches wide, so wider than I need, as I mentioned, so I'll have to rip a little piece off it. But I'm just going to cut a couple chunks 14 inches long for the sides, and then I'll do the shaping. Okay, here's the outline of the sides on the new boards. Again, the width at the bottom when cut will be 6 inches across. I just remeasured this on the feeder outside. This side length here is 11 3/4. So if you measure 11 3/4 inches from here to where the line crosses the board here, that's where that has to be placed. And then the top angles are determined basically just from the center point down to that point. So now I'll be cutting this shape out and tracing it on the other board to mimic the sides. So I'm cutting these angles on the cutoff saw here just by rotating the saw with respect to the wood that's being held at a 90-degree angle. So I'm just rotating the saw until it reaches these angles, and then tightening it down and cutting it. So I've done the top 2 pieces here. One side, now I just have to flip it around and do the other side, which would be like this. But I have to locate it first with a pen marking over here. For the second side now, I just trace from the one that I just cut. So you don't have to remeasure all the distances on that piece, you just trace off of this one. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do on the 2 end pieces is cut the slots where the glass will slide into. And to do this, I've basically swung the table of the cutoff saw again to match the angle that this line is sitting at. And then I'm going to do a couple runs along the line because I'll need that much width to enable the glass to slip into it. One cut won't be wide enough. That'll only be about well, not even quite 1/8 of an inch. So I think I'll do 2 cuts and hopefully that'll be adequate. So I've lined it up. Now I'm just going to do the 2 cuts. I was having a little trouble using the cutoff saw cutting these grooves because it doesn't have enough lengthwise travel to cut the ends properly out. So I ended up coming to the table saw using this miter guide and just running it through basically like that. You just have to set it up so it cuts the right angle. And that's a better way to do it because you get the same depth of cut along the whole length of the thing. So I've got them both cut out. Okay, now I'm going to cut the two pieces of the roof, which are going to be about 20 inches or 19.5 inches long. And then I'll have to rip a bit of this off because I only need them 9.5 inches wide. This board is 11.5 inches wide. And then I'm going to cut the bottom. The bottom on the existing feeder is made of 3 pieces of wood totaling 14.5 inches or so across. I think I'm just going to use a chunk of this wood, again 11.5 inches across, but I think that'll be plenty of width. I don't really need to probably go out to 14.5 like I did with the other one. Okay, so this is one of the roofs at 19.5 inches wide. Now the bottom at 15.25 inches long. Okay, now I'm going to rip the two roof pieces to 9.5 inches wide. Okay, now I'm going to cut the angle on the top of one roof piece, and then I'll have to cut the angle on the other half. Okay, so what I just did was cut this angle here, so these two pieces will fit nice and snug together at the top when they finally go on. Now, since this is rough cut pine, I'm just going to do a bit of sanding on the outer surfaces of the boards to make them a bit smoother, because I might actually apply a stain or a paint to this after I'm finished. Either way, it's better to have it smooth so the moisture doesn't soak in like a sponge to the very rough exterior. Okay, I've sanded all the pieces now, the outsides of all the pieces, so they've got a much smoother texture now, which will be better for if I apply stain or paint, just to add a bit of protection. The two roof pieces are here, so they'll just, one side will screw on, and this side will just attach to the other piece with 2 hinges. It won't actually be attached to the top at all, it's just going to attach to this other roof member. But this side will screw on with 2 screws on each side. And first though, I have to, before I do that, I have to locate where these sides are going to go on the bottom piece. And the critical thing there is to get them just the right distance apart so they'll accept the glass panes. And seeing as the glass panes are 14 inches long, I have to situate these at about 13.5 inches apart, because I've got grooves in each side going in about 1/4 inch, so the glass will stick into there about 1/4 inch or so on each side. So if I put these 13.5 inches apart, when you actually measure the distance between the sides of the grooves, it'll be like 14 inches and a bit more inside. I've decided to make a new bottom board because the original one that's on the feeder out there is quite a bit shorter, as you can see here. That's what this one was modeled after. But when you use this size, the end pieces have to be right on the end of this board, which I don't like. And it just makes fitting the glass in more difficult, because the boards I'm using for this feeder are even thicker than the ones I use out there. So I made this bigger bottom board, so now the end pieces will fit in here. I determined where they go simply by drawing a medium line along the length of the board, and knowing the width of the end pieces, which is 6 inches, I then just centered it on that line and 90 degrees to that line, and then estimated 3 screws each for each of the end pieces and where they should go. And I've calculated the distance between the two end pieces here is about 13.5 inches to allow for a 1/4 inch of the glass to go into each end. And that also leaves a couple inches over here, roughly, for extra space, which is nice. So what I'll do next is come in and pre-drill these holes. And then from the back side, I can use a countersinking bit just to enable the head to be sunk into the bottom so it's not sticking out. Okay, here's the new bottom board, sanded now. Now I'll just screw on the ends and hopefully it'll all work out right. Well, that was a bit more of a battle than I had expected. I got the two ends screwed in, and then when I went to put the glass in, it was too tight for some reason. I thought I had measured correctly, but they were too tight together, so I moved one out 1/2 inch, and then the bottom of the glass was falling out of the groove. So I think what was happening also was that these were not totally vertical when they were screwed in. So anyhow, what I ended up doing was one of my sides had a shallower groove than the other side. So I deepened the grooves on this one. I deepened them to 1/2 the width of the board, and that has now enabled it to accept the glass more easily. They still have to move apart a little bit just to get it started, but once it gets started, then it slides in easy. So a bit of a battle. So I guess if you're going to make something like this, be a little cautious about the exact dimensions that these two ends have to be apart in order to fit the glass that you're putting in there. So what eventually will occur here is I'll put about a 1/2 inch chunk of wood under here and under here just to hold the glass up. So you get this gap here, and the glass still doesn't exceed the top of this roof here, because you want to put the roofing sheet on, or the hinged piece as well. But you do need this gap wood here to hold it up, just to allow the seeds to fall out. Then I'll eventually put little edges around the bottom here to keep the seeds in. Put the whole roof on and the other glass, and then basically it's ready to be stained or painted if I so choose to do that, or could leave it natural if you want to do that too. Okay, I've been working on the bird feeder a bit more today. Just wanted to show people what I've done. Basically, the other bird feeder that I had consisted of 3 boards on the bottom, and they were about 5 or 6 inches wide each for a total of like 15. I thought this one board would do, and it's 11.5. Because it still allows a fair room here, but when I got it all put together with the glass, I realized it's not a whole lot of room. So I added a couple sideboards to each side. These are 3-inch wide pine, the same board as this bottom is made out of, and I've just strapped it together at the bottom, as you can see here. Just screwed a strap on each side to hold the 2 side pieces. Since the last update, I've added the roof, which now has hinges and allows the one side to open up to allow you to put the seeds in it. I've also done some finishing work down here on the base. There's also 2 wooden strips that fit under the glass and go out to the width of the first main board on each side. This allows the glass to be held up about 5/8 of an inch above the floor, which allows for a free draining seed mixture to come out. I've also added a couple stop strips, wood that has been sort of made into a slightly triangular shape and fits between these 2 strips that hold the glass up. This just enables the seed to be contained to a degree in the area immediately adjacent to the glass. This will contain the seeds a little better under the roof, out of the weather, and just make it a little neater, hopefully. So that's where the project stands right now. This morning I went downtown and picked up some semi-transparent wood stain, so I've decided I'm going to stain it just to give it an added bit of protection over just putting out bare wood. that can look good for a few years, but eventually starts to deteriorate and crack a little more easily than if you had given it a protective coat, I think. So also the stain will hopefully give it a little bit more of a finished appearance. We've got the bird feeder built, and now it's had a couple coats of stain, so basically it's completed. A couple minor things I'm still going to do, but generally it's done. I think it looks pretty good. The post that it sits on will go in between the two straps here, and I'll just screw that in from inside the feeder into the top of the post to hold it. When you look at the seed containment area, you can see more clearly now how I shaved this stick here off a little bit, just to allow more easily the cleaning out of seeds and other debris that accumulate in there. And the two hinges up here, I used 2.5-inch galvanized hinges on the top. And generally I'm pretty happy with it. There were a few little areas that gave me a bit of trouble, as I mentioned in the video, but if you just take your time and measure things carefully, you shouldn't run into any of those problems. Okay, so here we are with the completed bird feeder mounted on a pole. I just used another pole that I had for a different feeder and just switched feeders. This is just a 4x4 pole, and it had a couple side bars, one on each side of the pole, drilled into the pole. And now this feeder is just resting on these side struts and screwed into them. The nice thing about this setup, this is a mobile pole. It has cross members on the bottom for feet, so I can just move it around. Nice easy access for the seeds. Fill it up, close it down. Birds come here for several days and feed out of it without having to refill it. You can see how much seed this thing will hold, because half of this pail is full of seed, basically. And you can see there, it didn't even half fill this feeder, because it gets wider as it goes up, and it's still not even quite at the halfway mark. So it can easily take a full pail like this of seeds. I'm not sure how big this is. 14 kilograms of baking soda. Anyhow, it takes a lot of seed. I'm not sure this is going to be the final place where I put the feeder, but we'll start out here for now.